Well, it seemed like an open and shut case. The official account: a suspected drug dealer opens fire on deputies. They shoot back. One officer is wounded, the suspect dead.
But Dennis Dean's family always knew that there had to be more to it than that. In a News 10 exclusive, Gabriel Rojas investigates actually what happened on that night and how the wrong story became the official story until News 10 went digging.
Last April, narcotics officers caught Dennis Dean off guard in his Orangevale home. But once they had him in custody, they say he began cooperating with their investigation. So how then did he end up dead? Everyone who asked that question got an answer that day, but that answer was wrong.
Yeah, he was my boy. He was my baby boy.
Dennis Dean's father is the first to admit his son had problems. For a number of years, Dean managed to keep his struggles with substance abuse under control. But in recent months, old habits returned.
He was doing wrong. Sure, he should be in jail. Not dead.
In April, what began as a narcotics investigation led to a brief foot chase, but deputies quickly caught Dean and brought him back to his home.
If you could just have seen the room, you could tell that, I mean, he had to be down on his hands and knees. He was shot in the back. I just don't see how they could have felt threatened.
The day of the shooting, investigators spoke with reporters.
We don't know what his mindset was.
That day, the sheriff's department said Dean fired several shots at officers, even hitting one of them, prompting deputies to return fire. The sheriff's office cited imminent danger to the lives of the officers, leaving them no choice but to defend themselves. Dean's family couldn't believe it.
When we went to see the scene, we were immediately puzzled because we didn't see any bullet holes in the direction of where officers would have been standing.
I was suspicious right away. I thought this is not right.
Sure enough, when family members met with detectives a week later, their suspicions were confirmed.
Let's go to...
In a recording Dean's brother-in-law made at that meeting, homicide investigators outlined a new scenario.
We don't believe that Dennis ever fired a shot. We believe that the injury that the other officers sustained was likely from ricochet from other officers. So it doesn't appear that Dennis ever actually was able to fire the gun.
So what prompted officers to open fire? That's just one of the key questions Dean's family says it still doesn't have answered. The sheriff's office denied the family's requests for more information after that meeting, which might have shed light on what happened.
He runs from the residence, jumps over a fence. As he's going over the fence, he accidentally kicks one of the officers in the face.
Also in that meeting, detectives told the family after they caught Dean, he became cooperative. So they brought him back home and asked him to open a safe they found, a safe that required his fingerprint to open.
That's the big thing that just keeps going, around and round. Why would you let this guy go back in there?
When News 10 first contacted the sheriff's office to get information on the case, they declined our request, citing an exemption from the California Public Records Act. But several days later, Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones agreed to sit down with us.
We got nothing to hide. Let's get everything out.
Jones confirmed Dean never fired a shot. So News 10 asked how that story became the public version of events.
You make an issue of the fact that bad information got out in the press release. It's unfortunate, but I really don't, I don't have, I guess, as much problem coming to the conclusion that, you know what, in this dynamic situation, we put out information that turned out to be bad.
The information wasn't just bad. To Dean's family members, it seemed designed to prevent suspicion.
How often do they make up a story when there's not someone to contradict it?
This was a tremendously confusing time. At the time the press release went out, the officers hadn't even given statements yet. And so it was impossible for us to know from them what happened. We only had the benefit of limited information from other folks what happened at that time.
A week after the shooting, investigators had a much clearer picture of what actually happened. In the family's recording, detectives said Dean told them he had a gun in the safe, so they warned him they would shoot him if he made any sudden movements. They thought things were under control until Dean opened the safe. Deputies say he then reached for the gun.
At that point, at least one of the officers sees the gun, they make an announcement there's a gun, and the officer in the closet and at least one other officer began shooting at him.
I just think one of them jumped the gun, and once one started shooting, I just figured they all shot.
We asked the sheriff, if Dean never fired his gun, what did prompt the first officer to start shooting?
That is the critical piece of this investigation.
And have you drawn conclusions on that?
I have, and I'm perfectly satisfied that at the moment each of those three officers fired their weapons, opted to use deadly force, felt compelled to use deadly force, that they felt like they were in danger.
Without access to the written report, News 10 asked specifically if Sheriff Jones knows why deputies felt endangered.
Yes, I do know what that was, but it's nothing I'm going to comment upon the investigation.
Can you say why you can't reveal what that was?
It's part of an ongoing investigation.
Dean's family is also critical of how the shooting has been investigated.
We also had questions about how this investigation and others like it are handled. Coming up in 2 minutes, you'll learn what happens when officers have to investigate themselves and why Dennis Dean's relatives aren't the only ones who want a better system.
When a drug bust went bad last April, a suspect lay dead. Investigators gave the public wrong information, and Dennis Dean's family has been hurting ever since. How members of law enforcement investigate each other is an increasingly controversial issue.
News 10's Gabriel Rojas examines how a recently streamlined process raises questions about our system of checks and balances when it comes to the use of deadly force.
I don't think it's right for them to investigate themselves.
In the summer of 2011, District Attorney Jan Scully, citing budget issues, announced her office would no longer conduct independent reviews of officer-involved shootings, leaving law enforcement to conduct its own reviews.
The investigating officers know personally the officers who shot. So where's the oversight? Who watches the watchman?
On this point, Dean's family appears to have an unlikely ally.
I've talked to the district attorney about it. I would much rather see him continue. I've made no secret about the fact that I want that independent oversight. I want that second set of eyes looking at it.
A newly adopted protocol by the Sheriff's Office includes an additional review by the Sacramento Inspector General, but critics say it still won't match an independent review by the District Attorney.
There is no substitute for that.
Since DA Scully's decision, officer-involved shootings have climbed to a record high in 2012, doubling the decade-long average.
To what degree do officers cover their friends on the force when they all investigate themselves?
The sheriff insists his investigation into the 3 officers who shot Dennis Dean finds no crime was committed and no departmental policy was violated. Dean's family members stress they're open to that possibility, but without evidence, they can't help but fear the worst.
It looked to me like somebody got trigger happy.
They said that Dennis accidentally kicked one of the officers in the face. My worst fear is that that was the officer who is standing behind him. I'm sorry.
People want to know if any one of those 3 was one of the ones that Dean accidentally kicked in the face.
I have no idea, and I'm not sure I'd disclose that even if I knew.
It still just goes on and on. It's like a tape in your head, you know, because you don't have an answer. You don't have all you have is questions.
Last April, in the days following the investigation, the 3 deputies who fired at Dennis Dean were placed on paid administrative leave. They have since returned to active duty. However, the Sheriff's Department still considers this an ongoing investigation. Dale and Christina?
The Inspector General gave News 10 a copy of the new review protocol, and you can read that entire document by going to the web version of this story on news10.net.